Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is now available in digital HD, making it easier for those of us who are obsessed with finding little visual details in movies to spot all the little reasons why this movie won the Oscar for Best Animated Film, and should have probably been nominated and won for Best Picture, right? Hashtag Oscar's so boring. I already made a video that broke down a ton of the Easter eggs that you might have missed, but now that the digital version is out, I realize there are even more fascinating visual details that the animators snuck in, so let's rewatch Into the Spider-Verse scene by scene to find anything else we missed. Let's get started. Okay, the opening montage shows the Peter Parker of the 1610 universe, voiced by Chris Pine, catching us up on his backstory. Now in the other video I pointed out the mini Spidey Easter eggs here, but listen to this Uncle Ben moment.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Producer Phil Lord confirmed that they actually reused the audio from actor Cliff Robertson from the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie.
With great power comes great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility.
This is kind of like how they reused the late Marlon Brando's voice as Jor-El for Man of Steel. Next is just a little fun thing that I noticed. As Miles sings Post Malone's Sunflower in his room, he taps the marker on his Adam's apple so he can try to hit that high note of the song, and the animators include these little impact lines. Also notice Miles' drawings. One of them is Leopardon from the Japanese Spider-Man TV series. And as Miles heads out to school, he passes his height markings on the wall, and as he squeezes past his mom, he jumps up a little bit. Now, it's just a small thing, but it does set up the recurring visual gag of Miles' height throughout the movie, like how it suddenly shoots up after he gets bitten, and the deeper thematic arc of him learning to stand tall to be worthy of the Spider-Man identity. As his dad drives him to school, Miles sees a news report, and at the bottom of the TV screen there's a newsreel headline, Bitcoin hits new high with intro to futures market. This actually gets a callback later during the report of Peter's death. Bitcoin gets new high, Bitcoin hits new low. But also on that earlier newsreel, I love this other headline, largest baby born today. I wonder if this could be a nod to Kingpin? He does kind of look like a giant baby, and his whole evil plot essentially gets born on this day. Later in school, Miles' teacher hands back his test paper, which Miles intentionally bombed to try to get expelled, but notice how he also wrote a made-up month, Decemberary. Trying to get that wrong too, I guess. Now this could be a nod to the months that Spider-Verse got released, theatrically in December 2018, digital in February 2019, and who knows, it is an alternate universe, maybe they have alternate months, like Decemberary or Smarch. Lousy Decemberary weather. But next is one of my favorite details, and I thought I saw this before, I wasn't sure though. On Uncle Aaron's TV, as Miles visits, is an episode of Community, in which Troy, Donald Glover, wakes up in Spider-Man PJs. Glover has always been connected to Spider-Man. He voiced Miles Morales in the Ultimate Animated Series, and he actually played Uncle Aaron in the live-action Marvel Cinematic Universe. And at this time when Community was out, there was a big push to reboot the live-action Spider-Man with Glover as Miles. Unfortunately, now he's probably a bit too old, but it doesn't matter, he's a global superstar making music videos and winning Grammys and selling out Madison Square Garden. As they work on the No Expectations wall art, the Alchemax spider creeps up on Miles, and notice how it blends in with the spray paint color surfaces. This foreshadows a cloaking ability that's among Miles' new powers after the spider bites him. And later when Miles scrolls through his contacts, I actually pointed out in the past video the many cameos among the names, but I missed one, Jason Reynolds of the Miles Morales YA novel. And when Fisk's collider explodes, we see this wide shot of New York as the shockwave knocks out the lights. Now we come back to this shot every time we meet a new spider person, but if you look closely, you can see the 5 of these new spider things blasting out of the explosion, scattering throughout the city. And just another little detail I appreciated, when Wilson Fisk slams down on Peter to kill him, he roars with rage, and the animator stuck in some drool from his mouth that flies out. Now I also mentioned before that Post Malone, in addition to singing Miles' favorite song, Sunflower, he also makes a cameo somewhere in this movie, and we found out where. When the bystanders are marveling at the glitchy, interdimensional mess on the sidewalk, Post Malone voices this art snub.
Yeah, I think it's a Banksy.
And as the world learns about Peter's death, Miles visits the Spider-Man memorabilia shop where the late Stan Lee makes his cameo. But actually, if you pay close enough attention during this rewatch, you ruin your vision as much as I have, Stan Lee shows up all over this movie. He pops up for one frame on the subway train scene transition. He's one of the pedestrians who steps over Miles and Peter B. Parker on the crosswalk. And in the final seconds of the movie, he shows up for one super missable frame, saluting Miles with the famous Spider-Man web-slinger pose as he passes him on the train. Stan Lee, in a way, is kind of a guardian angel for Miles. And I'll point out later how this moment with Stan in the merch shop actually plays a major role in the final act. Moving on, when Miles meets Peter B. Parker, Peter's recap includes a shot of him getting hit by this bus, and if you look closely, you can see that the driver of that bus was the villain Tombstone, who ends up being one of Kingpin's henchmen in this universe too. In the Alchemax lab, I pointed out in the first breakdown that Olivia's reveal reveal as the Doc Ock of this universe was foreshadowed by the recurring number 8 imagery, like the octagonal glasses she wears, the octagonal furniture. But another detail I found interesting about her is this. Notice how she introduces herself.
My friends actually call me Liv.
Later in the movie, when Olivia arrives in Aunt May's home, notice what Aunt May says.
Oh great, it's Liv.
So does this mean Aunt May and Olivia were friends? It could be kind of a nod to the fact that in the 70s Spider-Man comics, Doc Ock and Aunt May actually had a relationship. They got married, it was weird. But since this Aunt May seems pretty involved in Peter's tech, maybe she used to work with Olivia, like in R&D or in engineering, maybe a kind of mentor figure. One of my favorite details that I spotted in the first breakdown, when Miles throws a bagel at one of the pursuing Alchemax scientists, when it hits him in the head, it makes the action word bagel. But listening to it again, they also slipped in this awesome sound effect.
All right, time to swing, just like I
I guess bagels do have a lot of gluten. Spider-Gwen recaps her backstory, and we see the moment she lands in Times Square. Now, I already pointed out most of the sign, billboard, Easter eggs, but this angle shows us another, back rub. Back rub was the original name for Google, and that's why it's in Google's multicolored font. You can also see Pickaboo, which I pointed out before is this universe's Snapchat, but I didn't realize that Snapchat's original name was actually Pickaboo. Also in Times Square, later Spider-Man Noir sees a sign for an EA water polo game. Now, they meet up with Aunt May and head down into the lab, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that I pointed out, but one new detail, Peter's weight bench. So many weights. That's probably a joke about Peter B. Parker's comparatively slouchy figure, but notice how the weights say Marvel on them. Could also be a joke about how the Marvel Cinematic Universe heroes have to get ridiculously jacked to play the roles. And of course, there's a ton of different Spider-Man suits on display. I ran through them before, but one that I missed is the Electro suit. That's to the left of the main suit that Miles looks at. Now, jumping ahead to when all the spider people end up fighting Fisk and his goons as the collider goes haywire, there's a few interesting new details that I spotted here. One of the alternate dimension set pieces that floats through the particle stream is this thing. This is from the movie Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's the food weather machine that Flint builds.
Or for short, the Flintstone.
Limited officer?
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs was of course another animated feature from producers Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and they actually brought that movie's VFX supervisor Danny Dimian and art director Michael Krinsky, who played these roles on Spider-Verse too. This whole chaotic finale feels like something directly out of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Also notice when Spider-Man Noir fights Tombstone, all of his action words are old-timey expressions like applesauce. And in the showdown with Miles and Kingpin, I pointed out before how there appeared to be some Daredevil imagery as a nod to Kingpin's role as the villain to Daredevil in addition to Spider-Man. He's the New York villain. But when the train they're on passes through the particle stream, Fisk sees his wife and son again alive in these alternate dimensions that they're flying through. And he could see lots of interesting variants flash through, including Vanessa and Richard having grown older, and ones in which they're different races. And one of the flashes of this train include Japanese kanji lettering on the wall, suggesting that these could be Fisk's family in Penny Parker's universe. But most interestingly, one version shows his son dressed up as Matt Murdock, with the suit and the sunglasses. So maybe this could be a hint to Fisk's complicated relationship with Murdock, seeing him as a son figure. But I want to jump back to that shot of Miles as he gazes at the Spider-Man suit in the lab. Notice how his reflection lines up to make him look like he's too short to fill in that suit. Because in this scene, we learn he's not yet ready to become Spider-Man. But later, when he returns to this lab, having changed, his reflection now lines up perfectly in the mask, as he's ready to bear this responsibility. This victorious moment was foreshadowed by Stan Lee himself earlier, with a seemingly throwaway joke.
It always fits. Eventually.
But this guardian angel was exactly right. And to emphasize this transition from humiliating defeat to proud victory for Miles, all of his big power moves in the final act of the film are restaged versions of moves that he learned throughout his journey. Like notice how his leap of faith off the skyscraper is now inverted to look like he's rising. And he's able to let go of the glass despite his past anxiety would force him to stick to things. Now he's totally relaxed. He's got Sunflower playing in his head on repeat. And now he swings up with a cheer, woo, following him up compared to the scream, ah, following him down in his fall earlier. And rather than smacking into the pole, he now uses a pole to propel himself up. And this parallel victory lap continues in the collider sequence. He swings in sync with Peter once again, just like they did earlier in the trees. And to prove to Peter that he's got this, Miles sweeps a leg and grabs him by the chest, perfectly replicating Peter's move on him earlier. And when he goes off to face Kingpin alone, his moves are an exact callback to the badass bravery that he saw from the first Spider-Man of this universe, the one who died. He clings to the rising turbine, he swings around in a backflip, and he lands upside down on the ceiling. All this is to show that this is a Spider-Man who doesn't exist in a vacuum, one who lucked into his powers by accident. His rise feels so powerful and heroic, Because it's made up of moments in which he was weak, an answer to his past failures. But he learned from these failures and he proved that he belongs with the others. And I just love that Stan Lee again and again sneaks into this movie because his wisdom was right from the beginning. Miles has totally got this. But I want to know, which of the alternate Spider people would you want to see an entire movie set in? Comment down below with your thoughts, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at EA Voss, and come check out my monthly live comedy show Darkest Timeline, and subscribe to this channel and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for watching, and let's see if bagels in this universe sound the same. Cool!